Hello, my name is Daniel Kaya Fusen. I'm a yoga teacher, spiritual guide, and healer. I am excited to lead you into the part of yourself which knows how to lead you. Today we're going to discuss how to create your own spiritual practice. Welcome. Today I'd like to introduce to you a simple way to determine the questions that can help you design your own spiritual practice. First, we're going to go over the questions and then we'll go over them one by one. Do you want to lead your own practice, or do you want to follow someone else? Would you like to emphasize mental, physical, or spiritual, mind, body, or spirit in the practice that you pursue today? Do you need a break of 1 to 5 minutes, a medium-term practice of like 20 minutes, perhaps half an hour, or something more substantial, around an hour, even upwards of an hour and a half? Is it best for you to emphasize a practice that is structured and that you largely predetermine? Or would it be best for you to do an exploratory practice which gives you the freedom to change significantly while you go through your routines? Would it be best for you to prioritize standing and working on your feet, or being down on the ground and working on all fours or even on your back and stomach? Would it be best to prioritize movement or stillness? If you choose to emphasize movement, would you get the most benefit from working with empowering exercises that are symmetrical, moving between a simpler pose to a more challenging pose and back? Or the opportunity to emphasize balancing poses that work left to right and give each side of your body an opportunity to lead the motion? Once you run through this list, you'll be able to quickly evaluate what you need, what you don't need, and how best to spend your effort right now. Okay, one by one. First of all, would it be best for you to lead this practice or to follow? This is a question that people ask all the time. If you choose to follow a video, or you choose to do a routine that perhaps you've memorized, or give yourself the freedom to explore. However, often people don't necessarily ask this question every time. And I encourage you to, because depending on where you're at in your day, it could be best to allow yourself to be led, even if it's by you. So you might want to consider recording practices that you do in order to gain the experience of leading yourself and perhaps learn to articulate clearly what you need to do. Or would it be best to follow someone else and allow, the experience and the guidance, the pace of another person to lead you? The gifts of this are profound because you can be brought through a flow and you can surrender that part of your mind which needs to make this kind of decision. I invite you to consider memorizing the routines. First, follow them as they are. It's perfectly appropriate to continue to follow someone well after the point when you know how to design and lead your own practice. There are profound advantages to following someone else and just allowing that leadership to hold you so you don't have to make decisions for a while. Many things open up in this way that could not open otherwise if you take too much agency when it's not time. The concerns are also profound because when you're following someone else's flow, you have to change every pose, every sequence at their pace. And this can deeply inhibit your own ability to stay with your breath pattern, your own ability to go deeper into a pose or a sequence that is ideal for you, and perhaps stay in a routine that you could gain much more from by exploring on your own. So by making this choice ahead of time, often you can gain the most blessings from the opportunity you have available in your practice. Short, medium, long. Hopefully this will become quite natural for you to pursue and determine on your own, but until you do, it can be challenging, largely because people often believe that more is more, and more is not always more. When you maintain the sense that more yoga would always be preferable, you lose the chance to take a break without criticizing yourself. And often the tension of saying, oh, I should have done more, is actually quite detrimental. When you give yourself clear encouragement to do a 5-minute sequence or a 20-minute sequence and let that be perfect, not just enough, but perfect for you in this moment, on this day, you will often do more over time because you will consistently stop putting pressure on yourself to always lengthen the time. Many people experience the kind of guilt syndrome of a sense that every practice should be an hour, and if you've done an hour, you need to be an hour and a half, and as a result, you don't do it at all. And thus they lack the 5-minute sequences and the 20-minute sequences, and even the 1-minute stretch breaks that could greatly benefit your life. Would you like to emphasize a mental, spiritual, or physical approach? Now, ideally, all of these will be woven together, but it is helpful to recognize that sometimes it's best to emphasize one of these priorities or another, and that if you do that, you're going to get a much better blessing out of your time. I want to invite you into a deeper relationship with what a spiritual practice is. A spiritual practice is designed to integrate mind, body, and spirit. So why would we emphasize any one of them? Well, it's likely that you will learn to determine whether or not your mind, your body, or your spirit need the most attention. Here's what this looks like. A spiritually focused routine will involve more stillness, more inward focus, and even more meditation. It's perfectly appropriate to stay in a particular resting pose for 10 minutes. It's perfectly appropriate to sit in meditation for half an hour, even an hour. When you are drawn inwards and you do recognize spiritual vibration, it's easy to keep your attention there. It can be ideal to stay with that and to not engage in much mental chatter, memorization, following of memorized routines, or even movement that could distract from the draw inwards. Similarly, it's not appropriate to attempt to induce a spiritual focus when it's not available. You can lay the foundations to go deeper inwards by doing a healthy physical routine. And in many cases, simply focusing on the physical routine can be ideal. Yoga itself, and the sequences of the grounding and the standing flower in particular, balance out most of the major tensions that people experience in their body. The exercises complement each other. And when you do the entire flow, or even do five chakras worth of the flow, there's a coherence that will put you in a better place to meditate. And I strongly encourage you to explore how that functions, meaning do a routine physically, keep the physical focus, and then sit still. Make this a regular challenge that you engage in, and you will find that it's a lot easier to meditate after doing some yoga. If your mind simply won't shut up, give it something better to focus on, which means study. When your mind is truly gravitating your attention, I encourage you to use it as a time to actively memorize routines. Read it. I've published the grounding flower below this video and the grounding flower itself and many other videos. Read it, print it out, memorize it. Work in your head to remember the sequences in order. First, remember the 12 poses, the 12 chakras, then add the 12 empowering exercises and the 12 balancing exercises. Use your mind in a way that empowers the practice. Deeper, once you've got those basic key ring cycles memorized, you can go into studying them. Use your mind to begin to recognize the associations between the chakra themes and the exercises. Use your mind to begin scanning yourself more actively to identify where do you consistently hold tensions. Use your mind to watch that. Think about it. One of the most fundamental advantages of following a structured routine is that you might not know how to balance out the different forces that are awakening in you or that you evoke through one exercise or another. That can be crucial because it's quite possible to open certain muscles in yoga or open certain vibrations spiritually that need to be balanced. They need to be effectively woven in a sequence that you might do well to memorize at first. For that reason, I've created the grounding, the standing, and the warrior flowers that allow you to turn off your mind. You don't have to make many judgments. And if you follow through the entire sequence, the exercises will temper each other. You're learning how to balance the different muscles and different energy frequencies in your body. And while you're learning, it's helpful to use a structure that has already been put in place to answer some of these questions. The unique gift of creating space that allows you to explore is that you're not holding yourself to any particular standard, and you're creating a dynamic relationship with how you feel moment to moment. On a day when your body is ready to unveil to you, a deeper relationship to how it wants to move, be, draw you into a sense of awareness for what's present right here, right now. Well, on such a day, it's really important that you continuously give yourself the opportunity to tune in and say, what now? What next? When I change position, I'm consistently going to pause and pay attention to what my body's communicating to me about how I'm aligned, what muscles might be overworking, while other parts of my body are, numb or not present. This kind of information is always being given to you. And if you're not tuning in and listening, feeling with a listening spirit, then you won't learn. And that learning is a gift that simply can't occur unless you're creating space to follow your own spiritual presence. Is it best for you to be up on your feet or down on the ground? Now, this is not a casual choice. Many times people don't necessarily recognize this distinction, but it really is a different kind of energy that you will bring to the practice and that perhaps is medicine for what you might need in your day. Sometimes it's just better to be down. If you need to be grounded or you need to emphasize a certain kind of strength where you use all four of your limbs, or even spend time on your back or on your belly, the benefit of this is profound, and you might have to learn to recognize it intuitively. It's not entirely a mental decision. When you're up, there's a sense of freedom that allows you to recognize the engagement of your arms and their potential to do things while keeping the balance of power down in the ground on your foundations. When it's time to be on the ground and you try to spend a lot of time standing, often you generate a kind of stress that is not necessary, and you might even feel like you're failing to follow through on a healthy practice, when in actuality you would have been better served by staying down on the ground. And you will get better day after day at determining when it is best to emphasize one or the other approaches. Sometimes it's best to be still, and sometimes it's best to emphasize movement. When it's time to emphasize movement, I do encourage you to think in terms of one breath per pose. So a very simple movement-based practice is to breathe, go into a pose, exhale, breathe, move to another pose, exhale, breathe to another pose, exhale. That kind of rhythm is very powerful, and sometimes it's the perfect medicine for your day. At other times, it's best that you move from pose to pose and stay. Much of the gift of staying in a pose is internal. You allow all the intensity of mental chatter and even physical anxiety to be translated internally into a stillness that opens up your spirit. And by opening up your spirit, you give an opportunity for the muscles to learn to work together more coherently. You learn to tune into whatever tensions are communicating to you that perhaps you're out of alignment, and you learn to make alignment adjustments subtly. And thus, you become much more efficient in your motion because you're efficient at holding yourself still in a given pose. When it's time to emphasize stillness, it's important not to try to move too much. And when it's time to emphasize movement, it's important not to stay still. It won't be productive. Once you have determined that you want to move, perhaps more than you want to stay still, it's nice to consider whether or not you're going to emphasize what I call empowering movements that are symmetrical and often move you from a less challenging pose into a more challenging pose. When you explore the empowering flower, you are engaging in a simpler pose and then moving towards a harder pose. And you will find, if you explore this, that you can actually determine how deep you go towards the empowering pose, and often just a gesture can be beneficial. The rhythm of moving back and forth in this way will empower you to get better at doing the more difficult pose and eventually stay with it in stillness. And at the same time, it gives you a sense of accomplishment. So you're not trying something and failing. You are doing something different, the empowering movement that happens to build the muscles that end up empowering you to stay in the challenging pose eventually. Another kind of movement entirely is the balancing flower, which happens to work for both the grounded flower and the standing flower. And a balancing flower is motion that emphasizes the left and then the right. So you're alternating which is more active and which is more receptive or grounding, stabilizing. This allows you to give each side of your body priority in a way that unveils tensions that are often difficult to recognize when you're working hard to stay symmetrical. Because in truth, you aren't symmetrical. The body is not the same on either side. You hold very different tension patterns. By creating the opportunity to emphasize each side, and even giving each side the opportunity to change things. So rather than being perfectly the same on both sides, you might be on one side in a pose and sense that you want to stay here much more than you did when you're on the other side. And as a result, you can unveil a tension that's unique to this side. You won't ever get to do that unless you consciously create space to unveil these kind of tensions and give them the opportunity to unwind by staying on that side of your body. This awareness will give you the ability to determine much more accurately how to make choices throughout your day, how to recognize ideal environments, clear opportunities, uncomfortable or even threatening dynamics, people whose intentions may be out of tune with your own, and relationships that are quite ideal for you to pursue and embrace and empower your life with. Your presence is telling you what you need. Your presence is communicating to you the best practice you can have today. And surprisingly, sometimes that means less. Don't make the mistake of presuming that more is always better. Sometimes it's just better that you spend a solid amount of time, like 20 minutes. Give yourself that gift. Stretch out whatever needs to be stretched. Allow yourself the opportunity to recognize exactly which exercises to prioritize and then move on, because your mind and your body are ready for something else. When you consistently tune in and respect this kind of limit, you will actually find that you begin to want more, and you want to carve out the time for more consciously and intentionally. But that's very different than pushing yourself to mentally achieve lengths of time or depths of pose or number of repetitions of any given exercise. When your mind is driving those kind of goals, you will often not be able to tune in to what your spirit and your body are telling you is best for you today. And I invite you into a relationship with your own spiritual practice, your own yoga routines, where you are consistently curious about the magic that wants to unveil to you, where you are consistently creating space for your body and your spirit to communicate to your mind, to bring into your conscious awareness what would be best for you to do right here, right now, today.